Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of the Film Ignite podcast. For all things film and all things TV, this is the place to be. Can you believe that it's almost been 10 weeks of this podcast? I cannot believe it. I created this podcast because I love movies. I love talking about movies, but I never really have anybody particular that I can talk in depth about movies too, so I created this podcast as a place to just share my thoughts, my feelings, my experiences with movies that I love. And through this podcast, I'm so grateful that I'm able to do all this, and it's been an amazing ride these past 9 weeks, coming in on 10 weeks. And for the 9th episode today, we are discussing a film that took me by absolute surprise and sent me on an emotional journey that I will never forget. It's 2013's Prisoners. This episode will contain spoilers. Now, Prisoners is directed by Denis Villeneuve, and he is one of the best directors working today. His work contains some of cinema's most beloved films like Arrival and Sicario, as well as polarizing works like Enemy and Blade Runner 2049. His newest film, Dune, is set to arrive in theaters later this year. Now, I've seen Enemy and Blade Runner 2049, and I love both of those movies, so I was excited to check out more of his work. It had been a long time since I knew about Prisoners, but I put off watching it for so long. I'm not really sure why. I do this thing with a lot of movies that I think are going to be really good, and I just sort of don't want to watch them because, not that I don't want to watch them, I do want to watch them, but I put off watching them because I just know that I'm never going to get the full experience of watching a great movie for the first time again, because there is nothing like that experience, and I'm always waiting for the right time, the right moment that I will just know that I'm going to enjoy the experience and be fully immersed in the movie and not regret watching it at that point and being glad that I watched it then and not waiting to a different time. But I'm so glad that I watched Prisoners when I did, how I did, and this movie may have just taken its spot as my favorite movie as of right now. This movie absolutely blew me away. From the opening scene, the atmosphere grips you. I love movies that create a tone and atmosphere that really make you feel like you're in their world, and this movie does just that. Prisoners doesn't waste a single minute of its runtime before diving straight into the story. Within what feels like the first 10 minutes, the main story has already kicked off. Keller Dover's daughter has gone missing just outside their friend's home on Thanksgiving, along with Franklin Birch's daughter. And the opening of this movie feels so natural and real, and seeing the panic that ensues after Anna and Joy go missing is terrifying to watch because it feels so real. The opening of this movie sets the tone, the atmosphere, and the overall somber and dreadful vibe that the rest of this film will follow. Now, I knew going in that this would be a dark crime thriller, but I had no idea. I was not prepared for just how emotionally dreadful, draining, and disturbing this movie is. This is easily one of the darkest and most sinister movies I've ever seen. It is relentless in its execution in hopes to make you cling on to Keller's character even more. Basically, there's an RV outside the house, and Keller thinks the person in the RV, named Alex Jones, is responsible, but he's revealed to be unable to talk properly and can't answer questions, so he's let go. But Keller goes over to the precinct to confront him, and he whispers, "They didn't cry until I left," leaving Keller with the suspicion that Alex is the one responsible. Now, since the police can't arrest him because all the evidence shows him to be innocent, Keller takes matters into his own hands, kidnaps Alex, ties him up in his demolished house, his old house that he used to live in, and takes him prisoner. This is the genius of the film's title and how it comes into play here, because we know the daughters are the prisoners, but now another prisoner, Alex, has been taken, and thus begins the start of such a psychologically messed up scenario that is set up so perfectly, by the way. In the beginning of the movie, Franklin, played by Terrence Howard, is shown to be sort of a silly goofball guy. He's playing the trumpet, he's messing around with the kids, he's having a good time. He's more of a softer guy. he's not a hard shell of a guy. Like he doesn't put on a facade or anything. He wears his heart on his sleeve, right? So when Keller drags him into the torture of Alex, the internal conflicts arise, and that is one of the aspects I love most about this movie, is that all the internal struggles that the characters face with their actions. You hear Keller say many times he doesn't want to hurt Alex, but he will do whatever he can to get his daughter back. And Keller is played by Hugh Jackman, who is an absolute beast in this film, and I mean that in every sense. His acting in the beginning, when his daughter goes missing, of pure fear and just slightly not believing it at first, like confusion, like, no, there's no possible way this could be happening. This is truly every parent's worst nightmare, and it's shown so incredibly well in the first opening scene. Just the panic, confusion, everyone doesn't really believe it to be true at first, and his performance shifts into pure unbridled rage that just comes thrashing out during certain parts of the movie. I had goosebumps in some of the scenes where Keller and Alex, who is played by Paul Dano, are in the bathroom together, and Keller is just beating the life out of Alex. It all feels somewhat vindictive and justified, all for about a few seconds, until it gets worse and worse, and you start to realize how disturbing it really all is. And Franklin finally says the words the audience is all thinking, what if it wasn't him? Man, when he said those words, it was such an oddly satisfying moment, because any logical thinking audience member would also be saying the same thing. You don't know if it's him for sure, but the situation that we're placed in with the character, with the situation, we have nothing else but to do but to sympathize and sort of get inside the head of Hugh Jackman's character. Think how he's thinking, right? And Paul Dano plays such a greatly complex character who is hidden for most of the movie, mostly so complex due to the fascinating writing and storytelling. This man, who at first you think is a creep, just the way he looks and the way he acts, screams, creepy psychopath. Especially when the cops first arrest him, he crashes the RV, you see him getting out, he's looking all weird and mangled, and he just looks like a creepy guy. Then the next night when he's strangling the dog from his collar, it's just so disturbing. And he goes from this weird, creepy persona of a guy to the victim of horrific torture, a helpless soul who by the end you realize was a prisoner his entire life. Again, the genius of the film's title comes into play, and let me tell you, the reveal that Alex was actually a prisoner as a kid for 28 years might be the most disturbing part of the whole movie, because after reflecting on what happened to him in this movie, I mean, the beating he took was horrifying, not to mention the extreme psychological damage done during both occasions of being kidnapped. It's the lingering dreadfulness of just the thought of something like that really just sticks with you in this movie, that Keller not only tortured an innocent man, but a man who had been held captive for 26 years before, all to save his daughter. That seems to be a running theme in a lot of action or drama thriller movies. What would you do to save your family? Like Taken, Liam Neeson's daughter gets taken. What great lengths would you go to protect the ones you love? And these sorts of movies mainly focus on the actions of people. What would they literally do in a physical sense? And this movie takes it a step forward. It doesn't just focus on the physical actions of what the characters do, but the psychological aspects as well. A character that I have not even mentioned yet is Detective Loki, played by Jake Gyllenhaal. He gives a stellar performance in this movie. There is so much subtlety and nuance to his character that makes his eventual downward spiral so enthralling to watch. He is first assigned to the case, doesn't really think much of it, just a regular case. You see him going on texting on his phone half the time. He's not really paying it that much attention, but as the film goes on, he finds himself more and more invested in the mystery of what happened to those girls, of what it led Keller to do, and Loki becomes more and more invested in the case, and it starts eating him alive. He becomes a prisoner to the case. It doesn't even need to be said that the genius of the film title is at play once again. The psychological warfare between Keller and Loki is fascinating to watch. It is a absolute masterclass in acting from both Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal, and an incredible feat in writing, directing, and cinematography. every shot in this movie is so meticulously crafted and placed by all-time cinematographer Roger Deakins. Yes, Roger Deakins. I didn't even know until after the movie was over that he's the one who shot it. He is the cinematographer for Skyfall and 1917, considered to be some of the greatest cinematic achievements ever. And there are so many fantastic, eerie shots in this movie that just, I cannot believe that. Like, when I was watching the movie, I kept thinking to myself, wow, this is a really well shot movie. These shots are so clean and crisp and deep. You could tell they were so calculated in what they were trying to show. And it just has such a unique style to it for such a character-driven movie. The shots were very unexpected. There's a lot of unique ones in here. Some of my favorite ones, for sure, the most iconic one is the hammer scene. You get like the sort of narrow look into the bathroom in the yellow tinted doorway and the yellow tinted bathroom, and Hugh Jackman's holding the hammer up. And just the way everything's all framed. And then when Paul Dano's character gets locked inside the shower, and you just see those lingering shots of just the light shining through the hole, looking through his eyes. And the shots near the end in the cold, snowy, the back of the aunt's house where Jake Gyllenhaal, Loki, is standing there. And how could I forget the chase, not the chase scene, but when Detective Loki is driving down trying to save Anna after she's been injected, speeding through the blaring traffic. It's such a fantastic scene because the whole movie has been this gloomy, gray, rainy, dreadful, miserable experience, and you finally get this moment of hope, this thrilling, just the rescue. It's so well done. The lights, the swaying through traffic, everything about that scene is so fantastic. And just, oh my goodness, Roger Deakins knocked it out of the park, out of every aspect of this movie. It fit the tone, it has its own style, and it brought so much more to an already fantastic story. But when the visuals are along to help carry the narrative, because at the end of the day, it's a movie, I still want something visually pleasing to look at, and this movie is just that. It is fantastic. Another favorite scene of mine is when Loki first arrests Alex and is interrogating him in the room, and we just get the close-up of them talking. It's Loki really close up, asking him a bunch of questions. Paul Dano sort of looking away, not really. He's stuttering because we don't know much about the character at this point, and it's intercut with the police officers checking the evidence, and then you see the branch that crashed in the RV. It's showing the interior shots of the RV, the outside, and there's no music. It's so eerie and it's so perfect. Like, I can't even describe why it works so well or what about it is good, but it just works. Like, when you're watching the movie and you just have an eye and a feel for when something just feels cinematic. Like, I'm not trying to sound pretentious here at all, but like, just those moments like those just make me so happy when I see something like that. I don't know what it is, man, but those scenes were fantastic. That was a really great scene of mine, especially how there was no music. It was just so eerie, and the mystery behind it all is what also makes it eerie. And I will say that I don't know if this film will be as good on a rewatch. I believe it will. I'm not saying that it's going to be worse on a rewatch, but having the mystery there, just like most crime films, most mystery movies, once you watch it once, the mystery's gone. So obviously it's not going to be the same as watching it the first time. Second time, you're going to be looking for more symbolism and character motivations and things you missed the first time, maybe leading into the mystery. But since the mystery's gone, the second time through might not be as powerful. But it's scenes like those that, when it's just that scene mixed with the lingering mystery of, did this guy actually kidnap, possibly even kill those two little girls? It's fantastic. It is very rare that a movie makes me feel something, like visibly make me feel something, or actually like shake me, give me chills, goosebumps, something, anything. And Prisoners makes me feel something in every scene, every shot. The sense of dread and the sense of doom just lingers with you even after the credits roll. Now, there's so much to unpack story-wise, and even without diving deep into that, you still have to appreciate the craftsmanship at work here when a fantastic director and an all-time classic cinematographer come together to create something special. And huge shout out Aaron Guzikowski, who wrote the screenplay for this film. He crafted such a great story, and I read somewhere that he was trying to get this movie made since 2007, and I'm so glad that he kept trying to get it made. He wanted to get this story out there because the writing is impeccable, the dialogue is just so sharp. It's just, you could tell, like, the scenes when Loki and Keller are sitting in the car after he finds him at the wine shop, and it's like a mental chess battle just going back and forth. To be able to write that, not only write that, but then portray it, have it be portrayed well on screen is so fascinating. The dialogue, every line is powerful, every line is important, and that's something I also want to talk about. Yes, this is a long movie. 2.5 hours is a long time to sit through a movie, I understand, especially a movie that makes you feel the way this one does. It might feel like a lot longer since it's sort of a slow burn. It's sort of hard to watch at times, but I still don't feel like a single scene, a single minute, or a single second in the movie is wasted in any way. It is a slow burn, but it is so well paced because each scene is important. Each scene either moves along the mystery. We're either one step closer to finding the girls after every scene, or it enhances our characters, gives us a deeper look inside of them, a glimpse into what they're thinking, struggling with, or what is to come. You know, I was on the edge of my seat this entire movie. My heart was pounding. My head was spinning. This movie grips you and it doesn't let go. And while the runtime is long, it is earned and it is well deserved, and it works because it is time well spent. And it honestly works in the movie's favor because the longer runtime really lets the movie breathe, take its time, and the longer setup and constant rising tension and despair makes for such a thrilling and well executed payoff. Now, this movie is a thriller in every sense of the word, and it takes you on an emotionally devastating journey that you may not necessarily think is an enjoyable time, and you may not be ready for. I say all these amazing things about this movie, but like I said, it's not necessarily an enjoyable time. This movie is fantastic, but it's also very depressing, emotional, raw, and disturbing, and at times it's hard to watch or even just think about. But so much of it is psychological, and I can still see this film for the creative craft and deep, and the subtleties of the characters, the cinematography, the writing, everything. I can see it all as a whole, and it's just so amazing. And another great thing about this movie is the ending. This movie has one of the best endings I've ever seen in a movie. Like, I'm not even overreacting here, guys. This movie has probably one of my favorite ending, maybe even my favorite ending of all time. I can't think of an ending that I maybe even like more. Maybe it'll come to me, but the ending keeps you on your toes and keeps you on the edge of your seat until the last final frame. But not in the sense of edge of your seat like watching Fast and Furious or something, like heart pumping action. It's like just you were just absorbed into this world at this point, and when you hear that whistle go off, just oh my god, when I heard that whistle go off, I was just thinking, genius. This is absolutely genius writing, genius acting by Gyllenhaal in that scene. By the way, that ending would not work the way it does without Gyllenhaal's fantastic acting at the end there. I will say that right now. And just having that whistle go off and having it cut right at the perfect moment makes this probably, I'm going to say it right now, the best movie ending I've ever seen so far in my life. Guys, overall, I've said everything I can put into words about how I feel towards Prisoners. There is so much to unpack with this film that I'm not even sure I did a good job truly explaining my thoughts. This is definitely a film that I'm going to have to rewatch to truly solidify my thoughts and feelings towards, but upon first viewing, it is virtually a flawless movie that I can easily say is one of the best I've ever seen in my life. It is one of those movies that makes you think, stays with you days after watching, and it's one of those movies that makes me want to make movies. The Film Ignite podcast is meant to ignite discussion on all things film and TV, so I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Prisoners? Let me know. As always, thank you all for listening, and I'll see you all in the next episode.